Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unzi Defiant, watching the stars through the main screen. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept holding the cup anyway. Space was quiet today, just the way he liked it. The communications officer turned around in her chair. Captain, we're getting a priority message from Earth Command. Jake set down his coffee and walked over to the main display. The screen flickered, then showed the face of Commander Lisa Grant. Her usual calm expression was gone, replaced by something that looked like worry. Captain Morrison, she said, we need to talk. This is classified, so clear your bridge of non-essential personnel. Jake looked around at his crew. Most of them had been with him for years. He trusted them all, but orders were orders. You heard the commander. Everyone except bridge crew, please step out. When the bridge was cleared, Lisa continued. We've received a distress call from the Kepler Coalition. It's bad, Jake, really bad. The screen changed to show a blue-green planet covered mostly by water. Beautiful crystal cities rose from the ocean floor, their lights twinkling like stars under the waves. This is Oceanus Prime, Lisa explained, home to about 50 million Natari. They're peaceful people, Jake. They've never hurt anyone. They spend their time growing kelp farms and studying the ocean. Jake nodded. He'd met a few Natari during his time in the service. They were gentle beings, more like intelligent dolphins than anything else. They couldn't survive on land for more than a few hours. 3 days ago, the Scarvan Empire showed up, Lisa continued. Her voice got harder. They've blockaded the entire planet. Nothing gets in or out. They're burning the kelp farms from orbit and jamming all communications. The screen showed new images now. Large, dark ships surrounded the planet like a medal. Ring. Below them, the ocean burned with orange flames where the kelp farms used to be. The Coalition is asking for help, Lisa said. They need medical supplies, food, and evacuation ships. Their own military is just exploration vessels. They've never fought a real war. Jake felt anger building in his chest. The Scarvan were bullies, plain and simple. They picked on peaceful species because they knew no one would fight back. What's our response? He asked. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Admiral Kate Sullivan is reviewing the situation now. She's calling it an act of war against a human ally. Jake raised an eyebrow. Are the Natari officially our allies? They are now, Lisa said. The president signed the papers an hour ago. Jake, this isn't going to be a relief mission. The admiral is mobilizing the Third Fleet. The Third Fleet. Jake whistled low. That was serious firepower. 37 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and Admiral Ryan Parker's flagship, the UNS Retribution. The Coalition doesn't know yet, Lisa continued. They think we're sending hospital ships and food transports. They have no idea what's coming. Jake understood. The Coalition species had never seen human military doctrine in action. They thought in terms of evacuation and aid. Humans thought in terms of ending threats permanently. How long until the fleet arrives? Jake asked. 6 days, Lisa replied. The Defiant is already in the sector, so you'll be their advance scout. Get to Oceanus Prime and assess the situation. But Jake? Her expression became very serious. Do not engage the Scarvan fleet. This is recon only. We need to know exactly what we're facing. The transmission ended, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He called his crew back to the bridge and ordered a course change toward Oceanus Prime Got as the ship jumped faster than light speed. Jake thought about the Scarvan. They were a warrior species, built for fighting. Their ships were tough, and their crews were disciplined. They ruled through fear and respected only strength, but they had never fought humans before. 2 days later, the Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Oceanus Prime system. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The Scarvan blockade was even worse than the reports suggested. 43 enemy ships formed a perfect sphere around the planet. They were systematically destroying anything that tried to leave the atmosphere. "Captain," his sensors officer called out, "I'm picking up debris fields. Looks like civilian transports." Jake's jaw tightened. The Scarvan weren't just blockading the planet. They were murdering anyone who tried to escape. On the main screen, he could see the crystal cities of the Natori deep underwater. Their lights were dimming as power failed. The kelp farms that fed the population were nothing but ash floating on the surface. "Sir," the communications officer said, "I'm getting faint transmissions from the surface. The Natori are calling for help on all frequencies." Jake listened to the desperate voices. Parents calling for their children. Doctors running out of medicine. Engineers trying to keep the city shields working as they slowly starved. "Captain," his first officer said quietly, "what are your orders?" Jake stared at the screen for a long moment. Every instinct told him to attack, to save those people right now. But he had orders to wait for the fleet. "We observe," he said finally, "and we document everything. When Admiral Parker gets here, he's going to want to know exactly what these bastards have done." Meanwhile, on the Scarvan flagship, Fleet Commander Vexthal studied reports from his ships. The blockade was working perfectly. The water dwellers were trapped and dying slowly. Soon their government would surrender, and the Scarvan Empire would claim another world. "Commander," his aide said, "long-range sensors are picking up a single ship at the system's edge. Unknown design." Vexthal looked at the sensor data. The ship was smaller than his destroyers, probably a coalition scout. "Ignore it," he ordered. "One ship cannot threaten us." He had no way of knowing that the small ship carried news of his actions back to Earth. He had no way of knowing that humanity had just declared war on his entire empire. And he had no way of knowing that in 4 days, Admiral Parker would arrive, with enough firepower to turn his fleet into scrap metal. The trap was set. The Scarvan just didn't know they were the ones caught in it. Admiral Ryan Parker stood in the war room of the UNS Retribution, studying the holographic display of the Oceanus Prime system. Around him, his senior officers waited for orders. The Third Fleet had been in hyperspace for 3 days, and they would arrive at their destination in less than 24 hours. "Report," Parker said without looking up from the display. Colonel Ben Torres stepped forward. "Sir, the 47th Orbital Drop Division is ready for deployment. We've run simulations for underwater combat scenarios. The boys are eager to get started." Parker nodded. Torres was a good soldier, the kind who got results. His troops were trained for the worst conditions imaginable. They had to be. Earth didn't produce soft warriors. "Dr. Santos," Parker said, turning to the fleet's xenobiologist, "what do we know about Scarvan psychology?" Dr. Maria Santos pulled up her datapad. "They're a rigid hierarchical species, Admiral. Their entire society is based on dominance and submission. They believe that showing mercy is a sign of weakness. In their culture, the strong rule and the weak serve. Or die," added Commander Alex Chun from his position near the tactical display. Chun commanded the survey vessel Unze Ranger, one of the smaller ships in the fleet. But his mixed-species crew gave him unique insights into alien thinking. "Exactly." Santos continued. "The Scarvan have conquered 12 species in the last century. Their method is always the same. They blockade a world, destroy infrastructure, and wait for surrender. Once the population is starving, they offer terms. Become slaves or die." Parker studied the faces around him. His officers were angry, but they were also focused. Good. Anger could be useful if it was controlled. "They've never faced a Deathworld species before," Chun observed. "Every species they've conquered evolved on garden worlds. Plenty of food. Mild weather, few predators. They don't understand what it means to fight for survival. Parker smiled grimly. Earth was different. Humanity had clawed its way up from a planet that tried to kill them every day. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plague, war, extinction events. Each crisis had made them stronger. Tell me about their military doctrine. Parker said. Santa switched to a new display showing Scarvan ship designs. They favor overwhelming force and intimidation. Their ships are large and heavily armed, but they're not built for extended combat. They expect their enemies to surrender quickly. What about their ground forces? Torres asked. Standard shock troops, Santos replied. They rely on fear and brutality. Their weapons are designed to cause maximum pain, not necessarily maximum damage. They want their enemies to suffer. Parker nodded. That was useful information. The Scarvan fought to break their enemy's will. But you couldn't break the will of a species that had survived everything Earth could throw at them. Sir, Shun said, I should mention that my crew includes 2 Nautori refugees. They escaped Oceanus Prime just before the blockade. They're willing to provide intelligence about the planet's defenses. Good, Parker said. Have them brief Colonel Torres on the underwater city layouts. If we need to go in, we'll need to know the terrain. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from ship-to-ship combat tactics to civilian evacuation procedures. But Parker noticed something in his officers' voices. They weren't just planning a military operation. They were planning justice. Later, alone in his quarters, Parker reviewed the intelligence reports from Captain Morrison's reconnaissance. The images were hard to look at. Burned kelp farms floating on the surface. Debris from destroyed civilian transports. The fading lights of underwater cities as their populations slowly starved. His communication system chimed. A message from Earth Command. Admiral Parker. President Ellen Rodriguez appeared on the screen. I wanted to speak with you personally before you engage the enemy. Parker stood at attention. Ma'am, the coalition leaders are getting nervous, Rodriguez continued. They're asking questions about our fleet composition. They expected hospital, ships and food transports, not dreadnoughts and orbital assault troops. Ma'am, with respect, the coalition doesn't understand the situation, Parker replied. This isn't a humanitarian crisis. It's an act of war. The Scarvan are committing genocide, and they need to be stopped permanently. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Ryan, I know your reputation. You're a good soldier and a better man. But the galaxy is watching. This will be humanity's first major military action in coalition space. How we handle this will determine how other species see us for generations. I understand, ma'am, Parker said. But the Scarvan chose to target civilians. They chose to commit war crimes. They need to face the consequences. Then show them what those consequences look like, Rodriguez said. But remember, we're not just fighting for the Nautari. We're fighting for the idea that innocent people deserve protection, no matter where they live. The transmission ended, leaving Parker alone with his thoughts. He walked to his quarters viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Scarvan fleet commander was probably sleeping peacefully, confident in his superiority. That confidence would be shattered soon enough. The next morning, the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Oceanus Prime system. The sight that greeted them was exactly what Morrison had reported. 43 Scarvan ships surrounded the planet in a perfect blockade formation. Admiral, the communications officer reported, Captain Morrison is hailing us from the Defiant. Put him through, Parker ordered. Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired, but his voice was steady. Admiral, the situation is worse than we thought. The Scarvan have been executing any Nautari who try to evacuate. I've documented at least 30 civilian transports destroyed in the last 4 days. Parker felt the familiar cold anger settling in his chest. What about the planet's defenses? Non-existent. Morrison replied. The Notary are pacifists. They have no military installations, no weapons platforms, nothing. They're completely helpless. Not anymore, Parker said. Take the Defiant to a safe distance, Captain. We'll handle this. As Morrison's ship moved away, Parker turned to his. Fleet Communications Officer. Signal all ships. Battle stations. Prepare for engagement. Across the Third Fleet, 37 human warships powered up their weapon systems. The crews had trained for this moment their entire careers. They were the products of a harsh world, and they were about to show the galaxy what that meant. On the Scarvan flagship, Fleet Commander Vexthal studied the new arrivals with interest. 37 ships, he mused. Smaller than ours, unknown. Design. Probably coalition reinforcements. His aide looked worried. Sir, their energy signatures are unusual. These aren't exploration vessels. Vexthal dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. Numbers don't matter. We have 43 ships to their 37, and our ships are larger. He had no way of knowing that each human vessel carried more firepower than 3 of his ships combined. He had no way of knowing that human crews trained in gravity fields that would crush his warriors. He had no way of knowing that he was about to face the military force of a species that had never known peace. Parker opened a channel to the Scarvan fleet. This is Admiral Parker of the United Nations Space Force. You are ordered to withdraw from Oceanus. Prime immediately and unconditionally. Vexthal's laughter echoed across the communication channel. You dare give orders to the Scarvan Empire? We outnumber you, alien. Surrender now, and we may allow you to live as slaves. Parker's expression didn't change. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal. After that, we will consider you hostile and act accordingly. The channel closed, leaving Vexthal staring at the screen in disbelief. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever spoken to him like that. Sir, his weapons officer said, should we open fire? Vexthal smiled. Yes, show these aliens what happens to those who challenge the Scarvan Empire. He would regret those words very soon. The first shot came from the Scarvan flagship. A massive energy beam lanced out toward the UNS Retribution, bright enough to blind anyone looking directly at it. The beam struck the human dreadnought squarely in the center of its hull. Fleet Commander Vexthal smiled as he watched the attack. That beam could crack a moon in half. No ship could survive it. His smile faded when the smoke cleared. The Retribution was still there, its shields glowing bright blue, but holding firm. A few scorch marks on the hull, nothing more. Impossible. Vexthal whispered. No ship has shields that strong. On the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Parker didn't even blink. Return fire, he ordered calmly. Target their flagship. The human dreadnought's main gun spoke for the first time. Unlike the Scarvan's single massive beam, the Retribution fired a coordinated barrage of energy weapons, railguns, and missile tubes. The combined firepower was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Scarvan flagship's shields lasted exactly 3 seconds. The hull lasted another 2. When the barrage ended, there was nothing left but glowing debris and expanding gas. Clouds. Vexthal was dead before he could process what had happened to his ship. Target destroyed, reported the Retribution's weapons officer. 42 enemy ships remaining. Parker nodded. Signal the fleet. Engage at will. No survivors. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human ships moved with deadly precision, their crews working together like parts of a machine. They had trained for this their entire lives. Every simulation, every exercise, every drill had prepared them for this moment. Scarvan ships were large and imposing, but they were built for intimidation, not combat. Their weapons were designed to terrorize civilian populations, not fight a real military force. Their crews had never faced an enemy that fought back with equal fury. Captain Morrison watched from the theory, defiant as the Third Fleet tore through the Scarvan blockade. Human ships moved like wolves, working in packs to isolate and destroy their enemies. They used tactics the Scarvan had never seen before. "My God," Morrison's first officer whispered. "They're not just winning, they're dominating." The Un's Ranger, under Commander Chan's command, demonstrated human ingenuity in action. The smaller ship used its superior speed to dart between enemy vessels, targeting their engines and weapon systems. Within minutes, Chan had disabled 3 Scarvan destroyers without destroying them. "Why aren't they finishing them off?" Morrison's tactical officer asked. Morrison understood. "They're saving them for interrogation. We need to know how big the Scarvan fleet is, where their other bases are located." Colonel Torres watched the battle from the Retribution's Marine Bay. His orbital drop troops were ready to deploy, but the fleet was handling the situation perfectly. Still, he knew this was just the beginning. "Sir," one of his sergeants said, "the Scarvan are trying to escape." Torres looked at the tactical display. Several enemy ships had broken formation and were trying to flee the system. They wouldn't get far. Admiral Parker's voice came over the fleet communications. "Pursuit Groups Alpha through Delta, you are authorized to engage fleeing vessels. No one leaves this system." Human ships peeled off from the main battle and chased down the fleeing Scarvan vessels. Their engines were faster, their crews more skilled. One by one, the enemy ships were caught and destroyed. Dr. Santos watched the battle from the Retribution's medical bay, where she was preparing to treat wounded. But there were no wounded human crew members. The Scarvan weapons simply couldn't penetrate human defenses. "This is incredible," she said to her assistant. "We've studied human military capability for years, but seeing it in action is something else entirely." The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it ended, the Scarvan blockade was completely destroyed. 43 enemy ships reduced to scrap metal and debris. The humans had not lost a single vessel. But the most shocking part came next. "Sir," the Retribution's sensors officer reported, "I'm picking up escape pods from the destroyed ships. About 200 survivors. On any other day, with any other species, those survivors would be rescued and taken prisoner." The laws of war were clear about treating enemy wounded. Admiral Parker's response would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. "Destroy them," he ordered. The bridge went quiet. Even his own officers looked shocked. "Sir," the weapons officer said carefully, "those are escape pods. The occupants are no longer combatants." Parker turned to face his crew. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold as space. They chose to blockade a civilian population. They chose to murder innocent refugees. They chose to commit war crimes. Now they faced the consequences. The human ships systematically hunted down every escape pod. No mercy was shown. No quarter was given. Within an hour, every Scarvan who had participated in the blockade was dead. On the Coalition's headquarters world, the leadership watched in horror as their human allies demonstrated what they called justice. Commander Grant received frantic messages from Coalition officials demanding explanations. "This is barbaric," transmitted Coalition leader Kethval. "You cannot simply murder prisoners of war." Grant's response was broadcast across the galaxy. They were not prisoners of war. They were war criminals. There is a difference. The Coalition leaders didn't understand. In their culture, warfare was about territory and resources. You fought until one side surrendered. Then you negotiated terms. The idea of completely destroying an enemy was foreign to them. But humans, had learned different lessons from their violent history. Sometimes evil could not be reasoned with. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to eliminate the threat entirely. As the debris from the Scarvan fleet drifted through space, the human ships moved toward Oceanus Prime. The planet's underwater cities still glowed beneath the Yone. Waves, but their lights were growing dimmer as power failed. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from the surface." "The Notori are asking for help," Parker nodded. "Signal the relief ships. Begin evacuation and supply operations immediately." But even as human crews prepared to save the Notori population, Parker was already thinking about the next phase. The Scarvan Empire was vast, with fleets stationed across dozens of star systems. They would learn about the defeat at Oceanus Prime soon enough. And when they did, they would want revenge. "Colonel Torres," Parker said, "prepare your troops for extended operations." This was just the beginning. Torres smiled grimly. "Yes, sir. Where are we going next?" Parker looked at the star charts showing Scarvan territory. "We're going to make sure this never happens again. We're going to end the Scarvan Empire once and for all." The galaxy was about to learn what happened when a Deathworld species decided to wage total war. The Coalition had asked for help with a refugee crisis. Instead, they got front-row seats to the complete destruction of a galactic empire, and the humans were just getting started. 2 weeks after the battle at Oceanus Prime, the human Third Fleet arrived at the Crimson Nebula. Intelligence gathered from captured Scarvan data cores had revealed the location of their main shipyards. Admiral Parker stood on the Retribution's bridge, watching as his fleet prepared for the largest military operation in human history. "Report," Parker ordered. Commander Chun stepped forward with a tactical analysis. "Sir, we're looking at 17 orbital shipyards, each capable of producing 3 Dreadnought-class vessels per year. Current intelligence suggests they have 42 ships under construction." Parker nodded. The Scarvan had been building their fleet for decades, preparing for a massive expansion across Coalition space. If those ships were completed, they could threaten every peaceful world in the galaxy. "Defensive positions?" Parker asked. 12 battle stations protecting the shipyards," Sean replied. "Each station is heavily armed and shielded. The Scarvan have also positioned their 7th Fleet here. 63 ships, including their newest dreadnoughts." Dr. Santos approached with her datapad. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the captured intelligence. The Scarvan weren't just planning to conquer the Coalition. They had identified 17 different species for complete extermination. They called it cleansing the galaxy of weakness." Parker felt the familiar cold anger building in his chest. The Scarvan weren't just conquerors. They were genocidal maniacs who viewed peaceful species as vermin to be eliminated. "Sir," Colonel Torres interjected, "my troops are ready for orbital deployment. We've identified the command centers on each shipyard. If we can take them intact, we might recover more intelligence about their other operations." Parker considered the options. A direct assault would be faster, but Torres was right. They needed to know how far the Scarvan cancer had spread. "We'll do both," Parker decided. Fleet engagement to eliminate their mobile forces, followed by marine assault on the shipyards. "Colonel, your people will have 30 minutes to secure the command centers before we blow the yards." The attack began at 0800 hours ship time. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. The Scarvan 7th Fleet was caught completely off guard. The enemy admiral tried to organize a defense, but his ships were designed for bullying civilians, not fighting a real military force. Human weapons tore through Scarvan shields like paper. Human tactics confused and overwhelmed the rigid Scarvan command structure. Captain Morrison, now commanding the upgraded UNS Defiant, led a squadron of destroyers against the enemy battle stations. The Scarvan stations were impressive, bristling with guns and protected by massive shields. But they were stationary targets, and human crews excelled at precision strikes. "Target the shield generators," Morrison ordered. "Coordinated barrage in 3, 2, 1, fire." The human destroyers fired as one, their combined firepower focused on a single point. The station's shields collapsed in a cascade of energy, leaving the structure vulnerable. A second barrage reduced it to scrap metal. Meanwhile, Colonel Torres and his orbital drop troops were preparing for their assault. The human Marines were loaded into drop pods, each one designed to survive atmospheric entry and hostile fire. They had trained for this mission in the underwater cities of Oceanus Prime, learning to fight in enclosed spaces against a desperate enemy. "Remember," Torres told his troops over the comm system, "we need those command centers intact. Kill everything that moves, but don't damage the computers. We need that intelligence." The drop pods launched from the Retribution like bullets, streaking toward the Scarvan shipyards. Enemy point defense systems tried to intercept them, but human engineering was superior. The pod's armor shrugged off energy blasts that would have vaporized any other species' equipment. Torres felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as his pod smashed through the shipyard's hull. The impact would have killed most aliens, but human soldiers were trained in gravity fields that made them stronger and tougher than any other species in the galaxy. The Marines burst from their pods into the shipyard's corridors. The Scarvan crew was waiting for them, armed and ready to fight. What they weren't ready for was the speed and ferocity of human combat. Scarvan warriors were large and strong, trained from birth to fight and kill. But they fought with honor and ritual, following rules that had been passed down for generations. Human Marines fought to win, using every advantage they could find. The battle in the shipyard corridors was brutal but brief. Human weapons were more advanced, human tactics more flexible, and human soldiers more determined. Within 20 minutes, Torres and his troops had secured the command center. "Admiral," Torres reported over the comm, "we have the computers. Downloading now." Parker received the transmission as his fleet finished mopping up the last of the Scarvan. 7th Fleet, 63 enemy ships destroyed with no human losses. The battle stations were rubble, and the shipyards were in human hands. "Colonel, what does the intelligence show?" Parker asked. Torres was quiet for a moment as he reviewed the data. When he spoke again, his voice was grim. "Sir, it's worse than we thought. The Scarvan have been planning this for over a century. They've identified 43 species for extermination, including several that we've never heard of." Parker felt sick. 43 species. Billions of innocent lives that the Scarvan planned to murder simply because they were peaceful. "There's more," Torres continued. "They have 8 more fleets positioned throughout their territory. Each one is assigned to a different sector of Coalition space. They were planning to attack simultaneously, overwhelming the Coalition's defenses." "When?" Parker asked. 6 months from now," Torres replied. They were waiting for the ships under construction here to be completed. Parker made his decision. "Colonel, set charges on all the shipyards. We're not leaving anything for them to use, and transmit all the intelligence back to Earth Command. We're going to need reinforcements." The human fleet withdrew to a safe distance as the shipyards exploded. 17 massive installations, each one representing decades of work and resources destroyed in minutes. The Scarvan had lost their primary source of new ships, but Parker knew this was just the beginning. The Scarvan Empire was vast, with hundreds of worlds and dozens of fleets. They would not accept the destruction of their shipyards quietly. 3 days later, the expected response came. A massive Scarvan fleet, over 200 ships strong, arrived at the Crimson Nebula. They found nothing but debris and the human Third Fleet waiting for them. The Scarvan Fleet commander opened communications, his voice filled with rage. "You dare attack Scarvan territory. You will pay for this insult with your lives." Admiral Parker's response was broadcast across the galaxy. "We're not attacking your territory. We're eliminating a threat to innocent lives. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to the laws of war." The Scarvan commander's laughter was cold and bitter. Surrender? To a handful of alien ships? You are outnumbered 6-1. "Numbers don't matter," Parker replied. "We have something you don't understand. We have a cause worth fighting for." The Second Battle of the Crimson Nebula began immediately. The Scarvan fleet attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm the human ships through sheer numbers. It was a sound strategy that had worked for them many times before, but they had never faced humans before. The human ships moved like dancers, their crews working in perfect harmony. They used the nebula's gas clouds for cover, striking from unexpected angles, and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Human weapons were more accurate, human shields more resilient, and human tactics more sophisticated. Dr. Santos watched the battle from the Retribution's medical bay, amazed by what she was seeing. The Scarvan fleet was larger and more powerful on paper, but the humans were winning through superior skill and determination. "It's like watching artists at work," she said to her assistant. "Every move is calculated, every shot is perfect." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Scarvan fleet was completely destroyed. 200 ships reduced to debris, their crews dead or captured. The human fleet had lost 3 vessels and suffered minor damage to 5 others. But the most shocking moment came when the human ships began hunting down the Scarvan escape pods. Once again, Admiral Parker ordered no survivors. "Sir," Commander Chun said carefully, "the Coalition is monitoring this battle. They're asking questions about our treatment of prisoners." Parker's expression didn't change. They chose to threaten innocent lives. They chose to plan genocide. They chose to fight rather than surrender. Now they faced the consequences. The message was clear. Humanity would not negotiate with genocidal maniacs. They would not show mercy to species that planned to exterminate the innocent. They would fight until every threat was eliminated. As the debris from the Scarvan fleet drifted through space, Admiral Parker was already planning the next phase of the war. The Scarvan Empire had 8 more fleets, dozens of worlds, and billions of people who had been raised to believe in their racial superiority. All of them would have to be dealt with. The galaxy was about to learn what total war looked like when waged by a species that had never known peace. The Coalition had asked for help with a refugee crisis. Instead, they were witnessing the complete destruction of a galactic empire, and the humans were nowhere near finished. 6 months after the first battle at Oceanus Prime, Admiral Parker stood in the ruins of the Scarvan Imperial Palace. The once mighty building was now a smoking crater, its golden spires reduced to twisted metal. Around him, human marines patrolled the streets of the former capital, maintaining order among the surviving population. The war was over. The Scarvan Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for over 2 centuries, had been completely dismantled. Their fleets were destroyed, their government overthrown, and their military leaders dead or imprisoned. Colonel Torres approached with his final report. "Sir, we've completed the occupation of the last Scarvan world. Resistance has ended. The survivors are being relocated to supervised colonies as planned." Parker nodded. The human strategy had been simple but effective. They had not tried to conquer the Scarvan Empire. They had destroyed it entirely, removing its ability to threaten anyone ever again. "Casualties?" Parker asked. "Minimal on our side," Torres replied. "The Coalition medical ships report that we've successfully evacuated over 2 billion Scarvan civilians to their new homes. The supervised colonies are functioning well under coalition oversight. It had been a necessary but difficult decision. The Scarvan people had been raised in a culture of violence and racial superiority. They could not be trusted to govern themselves, at least not for several generations. The coalition had agreed to oversee their rehabilitation, teaching them to live peacefully with other species. Dr. Santos joined them, carrying a data pad with her final analysis. Admiral, I've completed my study of the Scarvan war machine. The scope of their planned genocide was even worse than we initially thought. Parker took the pad and read through the summary. The Scarvan had compiled detailed plans for the extermination of 67 different species. They had studied each civilization, learning their weaknesses and planning their destruction. The files contained biological weapons designed to target specific alien physiologies, psychological warfare tactics to break enemy morale, and detailed schedules for the systematic murder of entire worlds. They weren't just conquerors, Santos continued. They were monsters. Every species they had ever encountered was marked for either slavery or death. There was no room in their vision for peaceful coexistence. Parker handed the pad back to her. Then we did the right thing. The galaxy is safer without them. A communication signal interrupted their conversation. Captain Morrison's face appeared on Parker's portable display. Morrison had been promoted to admiral after the war, and was now commanding the new Earth Defense Station orbiting Oceanus Prime. Admiral Parker, Morrison said, we're receiving a delegation from the Coalition Council. They want to speak with you about the post-war arrangements. Parker sighed. The Coalition had been asking difficult questions ever since the war ended. They didn't understand human methods, and they were concerned about humanity's growing military presence in their space. Send them down, Parker replied. We'll meet in the former throne room. An hour later, Parker sat across from a group of coalition leaders in what had once been the center of Scarvan power. The alien delegates looked uncomfortable in the ruined palace, their peaceful natures disturbed by the evidence of human warfare. Coalition leader Kethful spoke first. Admiral Parker, we must discuss the future of this region. The Scarvan threat is ended, but your fleet remains. When will Earth withdraw its forces? Parker studied the alien leader carefully. Kethful was a Zentari, a species that had never known violence. His people had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival, and they genuinely could not understand the human approach to conflict. We're not withdrawing, Parker said simply. We're establishing permanent bases to ensure this never happens again. The coalition delegates exchanged worried glances. Admiral, another leader said, we appreciate your help, but we did not ask for occupation. We asked for aid. You asked for help with a refugee crisis, Parker replied. We provided permanent solutions. The Scarvan Empire is gone. Their military is destroyed. Their ability to threaten innocent lives has been eliminated completely. But at what cost? Kethful asked. You've destroyed an entire civilization. Billions of Scarvan are dead. Parker's expression hardened. Billions of innocent people are alive because of our actions. The Scarvan had planned to exterminate 67 species. Would you prefer we had allowed that to happen? The coalition leaders were quiet for a moment. They had seen the intelligence reports, the detailed plans for genocide that the Scarvan had compiled. But their peaceful nature made it difficult for them to accept the human solution. There must have been another way, Kethful said finally. Negotiation, compromise, peaceful resolution. The Scarvan don't negotiate, Parker replied. They conquer or they die. We gave them the choice at Oceanus Prime. They chose to fight. Commander Chun, who had been standing quietly near the window, stepped forward. With respect, sir, the Coalition needs to understand something about human nature. We don't fight for territory or resources. We fight for principles. He turned to address the alien delegates directly. Your species evolved on worlds where cooperation was rewarded. Ours evolved on a world where the strong protected the weak, or the weak died. When we see innocent people being threatened, we don't negotiate. We eliminate the threat. Dr. Santos added her perspective. The Scarvan culture was built on the idea that might makes right. They believed that peaceful species deserved to be enslaved or killed. That ideology cannot be reformed. It can only be destroyed. Coalition leader Kethval looked troubled. But what about the surviving Scarvan? The ones in the supervised colonies? Do they deserve to live under constant guard? They're not prisoners, Parker explained. They're being rehabilitated. The Coalition's educators are teaching them new ways to think, new ways to live. Their children will grow up in a culture of peace, not violence. And if they refuse to change? Another delegate asked. Parker's answer was simple and chilling. Then they'll remain supervised until they do. We will not allow another generation of genocidal maniacs to threaten the galaxy. The meeting continued for several hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Coalition could not force humanity to withdraw, and they were beginning to understand that they didn't want to. The galaxy was safer with human warships patrolling its borders. As the delegates prepared to leave, Kethval made one final attempt. Admiral, we understand your methods have been effective, but the galaxy is watching. Other species are asking questions about human intentions. Some are beginning to fear you. Parker stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful streets where human Marines walked alongside Coalition peacekeepers. Former Scarvan civilians were learning to live without the constant threat of violence. Children played in parks that had once been military training grounds. Let them fear us, Parker said finally. As long as they're peaceful, they have nothing to worry about. But if they threaten innocent lives, if they plan genocide, if they choose to become like the Scarvan, then they'll face the same consequences. The Coalition delegates left without another word, carrying Parker's message back to their respective governments. The galaxy would have to adjust to a new reality. Humanity had shown what happened to species that threatened the innocent. 3 months later, President Ellen Rodriguez addressed the United Nations General Assembly on Earth. The session was broadcast across human space and beyond, carrying her words to every corner of the galaxy. 6 months ago, we received a call for help from our allies in the Kepler Coalition. They asked us to save 50 million innocent lives from genocide. We did more than that. We eliminated genocide as a threat to the galaxy. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Some have called our methods extreme. Some have said we went too far. But I ask you this. How far is too far when protecting the innocent? How much force is too much when stopping genocide? The chamber was silent as she continued. The Scarvan Empire is gone. Their fleets are destroyed. Their plans for galactic extermination have been reduced to ashes. 67 species that were marked for death are now safe. Billions of innocent lives continue because we chose to act. Rodriguez's voice grew stronger. We did not seek this war. We did not want to become the galaxy's protectors. But when faced with evil, when confronted with those who would murder the innocent, we did what we had to do. She concluded with words that would be remembered for generations. Earth does not conquer. Earth does not enslave. Earth does not threaten the peaceful. But Earth will never again allow genocide to occur while we have the power to prevent it. This is our promise to the galaxy. This is our commitment to justice. The broadcast ended, but its message echoed across the stars. Humanity had taken its place as the galaxy's guardians, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple promise that evil would face consequences. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. Species that had once lived in fear of stronger neighbors now knew that humanity stood ready to protect them. The human fleet grew larger, establishing bases in every sector, patrolling the space lanes with quiet efficiency.